Thank you, Scott. I feel like I should have had some sort of WWE entrance song to that. So yeah. I appreciate it. So, like Scott said, my name's Ross Connolly. I'm the Deputy State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in New Hampshire. I gave a talk yesterday on cannabis policy, but I don't know how many people were there. So just a show of hands, who here in the crowd knows what AFP is, what we do? So about half. So AFP, we're the largest grassroots advocacy organization in the country, 35 state chapters, soon to be operating in all 50 states. And we advocate for what's called a mutual beneficial society. We want to limit government coercion and instead incentivize mutual beneficial exchange. We find that that is the best path forward to protect liberty and to increase personal fulfillment and self-actualization. So that's what we do. We work within the institution of government here in New Hampshire and nationally to limit barriers so that you're free to do, you know, in the crypto world, you're free to operate within the crypto world with very minimal government interference. So that's what AFP does. I brought Joël here because we're very new to the crypto space. We've just started engaging on crypto policy, both at the federal level and at the state level across the country. So I am no expert in how crypto works or you know, the blockchain, but we are advocating for regulatory frameworks at the state level to get government out of the way so that you are free to experiment with crypto, you're free to use it as a means of exchange, and you own it as an actual asset instead of this ambiguous regulations that the IRS, the SEC, and state governments are trying to implement. So we're trying to remove those barriers, create an environment of experimentation and innovation. So that's you know, my policy background in the space, but I want to give an opportunity to Joël to sort of talk about his background too.
Hey, thanks, Ross. So my name is Joël Valenzuela. I have been pretty much using cryptocurrency in my daily life for about 9 years straight. I moved to New Hampshire in 2013, got my first Bitcoin in exchange for a pizza, how fitting. And basically since then, I can't remember if I don't think I've ever bought any. I've only ever received it in exchange for goods and services. And starting in 2015, I stopped accepting payment in fiat currency, only in crypto from then on. And since then, I've just been, you know, working full-time in the space, trying to advance what I see as probably one of the greatest turning overs in freedom's favor in, you know, many people's lifetimes. And so, yeah, I run a podcast called Digital Cash Network. I try to educate people on kind of go first and then educate people on how to live as much of their life as possible, not using, you know, fiat government currency and institutions, and having, you know, true financial self-sovereignty.
Yeah, that sort of fits in well with what we want people to be able to freely use this. You know, whether it's buying homes, which you can do in New Hampshire, or buying any sort of asset with crypto, and really pushing back when it comes to the national level. We've been one of the loudest voices pushing back on central bank currencies. That's you know, on the national stage, that's our biggest concern, is this push by the Federal Reserve, the IRS, the people in Washington who want to control your lives through crypto. We want the financial freedom that comes with it. Is you can unleash an enormous amount of innovation and financial freedom from using crypto. So here in New Hampshire, we were widely viewed for many years. We were the leaders on cryptocurrency policy. We allowed, if you talk to Mark Warden, who's around in Porcupine Real Estate in the back there, if you want a home, go talk to Mark. But you can buy a house in Bitcoin, you can buy a house in crypto here. And we had places like Portsmouth where it was, I think for a long time, one of the centers where you could use crypto as a currency in most places around Portsmouth. So we were leading for many years, and the state of New Hampshire did encourage that, but we've fallen by the wayside. There's been a bunch of states that have sort of eclipsed us in setting up regulatory frameworks where you're more free, and especially businesses are more free to actually experiment with digital financial institutions. So our biggest issue are these state regulations that are extremely onerous. They were applied to fiat currencies. They were applied to, the banking industry, which sort of exists to keep people out of it. They don't want a lot of competition. So our idea is really setting up what we call regulatory sandboxes that really suspends a lot of regulations at the state level up to a certain amount of customers if you're a large corporation or a small business, where you're free to just do. Our ideal is really, there's been a few states that have done this recently. Arizona, where Joel's from, it was the first state to pass a specific fintech regulatory sandbox back in, I think, 2018. But then, since then, states like North Carolina did fintech and insurance regulatory sandboxing, and the state of Utah, we believe, has the best framework. They did a universal regulatory framework so that it suspends onerous regulations in a whole host of industries. This could apply to robotics, it could apply to crypto, it could apply to flying cars, which New Hampshire, I'll put in, is the only state that has legalized flying cars. This is something we're looking to implement here in New Hampshire and push back on a lot of the threats that are coming from Washington, D.C. when it comes to crypto. Sort of what we see emerging as one of the biggest dynamics is this battle between central bank currencies, digital currencies, and free exchange markets for digital currencies. We obviously like the latter, but I would be interested in, Joël, your sort of comments on that dynamic between, the Fed coins and, things like Bitcoin, Dash, Monero.
Yeah, so it's been kind of fascinating to see the central government, obviously, like the Federal Reserve, has had a monopoly on the currency for a long time, and the amount of control, however, that has been able to be exerted is great, but not unlimited. In that, between the Federal Reserve and your end user payment app, where you end up paying for your coffee, there's a lot of layers in between there. Of course, you can still be financially censored. You can still have the government find out and pressure a bank to close down your account or whatever. But for example, you could still pay in cash in a lot of spots. And so there was always this dynamic of the government had a lot of financial control over people. But then when we have cryptocurrencies come around, starting with Bitcoin in about 2009, one thing about government, we don't like it because it's because of a lot of reasons, honestly. But one thing is slow and inefficient, but in this case, it might have worked in our favor in that they took forever to realize cryptos were a threat to them and to take any kind of action on that sort of seriously. And so now it's, in my view, the cat's out of the bag. At this point, there's no way you can stop people from using decentralized digital currencies on the whole. You can squish them down for a while, make them go underground, but right now it's too big to fail. We love that phrase, huh? So the kind of dark side of this very beautiful thing is that it has kind of accelerated government's plans to move to a more efficient form of repression. And so the thing about, there's a bunch of different, the term CBDC, or central bank digital currency, is obviously, it doesn't always strictly mean the same set of, factors in every case, but basically imagine the Federal Reserve controlling, you download the Federal Reserve app and you pay, the merchant has the Federal Reserve, so the Federal Reserve not only issues your money, but then has ultimate control all the way through, and ultimate surveillance of your entire money every step of the way, and can just blacklist addresses or merchants or whatever, like from the root. And so it's the same stuff that they're trying to do today, and they are largely doing, but on a much more, I guess, Orwellian efficient kind of a way, where one service has ultimate knowledge and control over everyone's financial activity directly. They don't have to go find tell the bank that they have to report your transaction, and then, oh, well, let's look into this, and oh yeah, you should stop servicing this guy and ban his account, or it's not all those steps. It's just like at central command, boink, there you go. And so it's kind of, maybe I'm just an optimist. I don't think the world is going to end up going this way. I think we've decentralized, permissionless money has gotten far and fast enough to where I think that's the way the world's going to go, but maybe I'm just an optimist. I'm not ignoring this horrible threat that it could go the other way and be worse than before crypto existed in terms of, everyone's financial freedom.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, that's one of the reasons we at AFP are engaged in this space now, because we fight at the State House for restrictions on the government's use of surveillance. We fight for their restrictions on facial recognition technology. The privacy element of creating a central bank currency where it's digitally accessible and they can have that ultimate control that Joel was talking about, we see that as an enormous threat, especially compared with those other technologies that can really create a panopticon of surveillance for a society. A lot of people, this is a big topic in the State House this past year, is the concern with these social credit scores that the Chinese are doing and some other countries are doing, where you can bump up a currency with somebody's online presence if you say the wrong thing, if you have the wrong opinions, or you visit the wrong websites, then they can all of a sudden just shut down your access to finances. And so we come at it from both the financial freedom aspect, but also from the privacy aspect, because that's one of the biggest threats. And to Joel's point, it is kind of funny, because for years, they did not really do anything with crypto. They sort of just let it go. I think they thought it was a big joke, that it would never, this FRN, Federal Reserve note that's backed up by the, good faith and credit of the United States, and we have such good faith and credit right now, that there's nothing that could ever threaten that. And here we are today, where countries are opting out of using the US dollar as a reserve currency, and it's a giant threat to the Federal Reserve System. And so now, all of a sudden, they're talking about doing these digital currencies. And us on the side of liberty, we have to push back on that as much as humanly possible, and just not accept that. And the best opportunity, the best market signal to push back on that is using free market systems of cryptocurrency. So that's one of our main concerns. We've submitted letters to the committees that are talking about this in Congress. The good news is, I'm with Joel. I'm very optimistic. I don't think that these things, if the Federal Reserve comes out with a digital currency, that I don't think the vast majority of America would accept it. One, I think it lacks one of the most important aspects is, is it scarce? Is it actually worth anything? And that's a kind of big consideration when you're talking about money. And I'm sure that whatever, reserve coin they come up with would not have very transparent, stuff with the public to show that this is how they're mining it. This is the scarcity of the product. This is why it's worth something. So, I think at the end of the day that, free market crypto is gonna win, but we do need to set up these, preempt the federal government and make sure that we're essentially getting ahead of them, because they don't have many rules on this. They don't equally enforce it. Just talk to Jeremy Kauffman if you see him around, what the SEC did to library. That's a consistent story. They go after the small guys. They're not going after, the Wall Street firms that are pumping and dumping coins all the time. Their focus is on the people that are using it as a free means of exchange. So their rules, we can preempt them at the state level, and just Jeremy, I talked to him before this. He's not here, but he had this idea of making things intrastate. So if you just do it in New Hampshire, the SEC, the IRS really doesn't have as much control over that. I think that's a worthy thing to explore in public policy at the state level, but also just getting these silly regulations that were established in the 1800s for the banking industry, just getting them out of the way and allowing people to experiment and innovate with it. I'll say the biggest argument from the opposition on this is usually, well, people will buy into this. What if they lose all their money? They buy Bitcoin when it's $65,000, and then it drops to $18,000, and they lose all their money. I would just say, we're experiencing a bit of that with Federal Reserve notes right now through inflation. So that argument is kind of silly, since they devalued the currency that everyone's using today. Everything's a risk of what you're buying into, whether it's a stock, whether it's a cryptocurrency, whether it's the money that you're paid for your time at work, that can be devalued. You can lose your life savings from it, but it's a risk that free investors, free people should be able to take. And as time goes on, I'm fairly confident that it's going to be more and more stable for people, especially compared with fiat currency from around the world. So, I think that's the future that we should be shooting for, but it's up to us to get involved. And I know he's not here at PorcFest this time, but Representative Keith Ammon, if you're familiar with him, if you're interested in this issue, please talk to him. We're working with him on these bills. He sits on the governor's crypto commission, and he's about, I think, to pass a bill that sort of starts to touch on the regulatory aspect in the crypto space. So he's the biggest champion in the State House for this. Same with Majority Leader Jason Osborne. It's been a priority for him. If you deal with crypto, you have to get involved so that we can get these things accomplished. Because as it turns out, if you're not familiar with New Hampshire's system of government, we have 400 state reps, 24 senators, 5 executive counselors who provide a check on the governor. And most of them, we pay them $100. They're volunteers. So a lot of the people we have are septuagenarians, octogenarians. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about when it comes to crypto. So getting that perspective in the State House is a key to getting some of these things done. So I kind of, for Joël, I want to see sort of what you think. I mean, one of the topics, I was walking down the hill talking to Chow and discussing, like, obviously there's been a huge dip in especially Bitcoin over the past month or so, and there's a lot of volatility. That's what people are really concerned about. What do you sort of see in the next year or so, the path for crypto, with the volatility? What do you think's behind it? And how do we get to a point where people are using this more?
Yeah, so crypto is an interesting spot as a new technology, but it's kind of funny that the first crypto, Bitcoin, that came out as like a means of exchange and a store of value, but at the same time, people use it as sort of like a stock to speculate on like a company. So like, for example, if Amazon shares go way up, the price of Amazon products don't go up don't go up equally. It's not like, I don't know what the price of buying like something on Amazon is going to be. I don't know what it's going to be because people are speculating on the stock. So that's a little bit of a quirky bit on some aspects. But the big thing is just, let's be honest, this is still a radically new technology that it goes far beyond just money, although money is the thing that I'm most interested in because that's one of the places the government's, controls us the most. But we're kind of seeing an explosion of possibilities, and just sort of similar to the dot-com bubble, where the internet didn't exist, and now without the internet, can any of us really survive today? Like the amount of infrastructure and everything that's kind of built on that. And so in the meantime, there's a lot of people understanding that this technology is the future and is very important, and putting money on it, betting on what's going to succeed. And the thing is, it sounds like I'm, for Mr. Crypto Bull, it sounds like I'm almost like dumping on it a little bit, but no, it's most of crypto and the money in it is pure speculation. Most of it is not what people are using every day. So for example, if you pick almost any crypto project and you consider the amount of money that's in it, as in, valuation, market cap, investment, whatever, it's the vast majority of that is just people putting money in and hoping where it is, versus there's only let's say 10% of that is people buying the token to send it for a purpose, use it, and then sell it or whatever. So we're always going to see speculative ups and downs and stuff, as long as it's a mostly speculative space. But then, the dot-com bubble came and went. Everyone is on the internet. Everyone is using stuff online, and it's not quite as volatile, kind of as a result. So that's the biggest thing is basically people are putting the cart before the horse a little bit, which is what speculators do, right? They're putting money on something that's so for example, Bitcoin was more valuable, I believe, than Amazon at some point. Now, compare how many people are sending in, how much actual economic activity is taking place on the Bitcoin blockchain of sending and receiving and stuff, versus how much actual activity is going through Amazon. There's a giant disparity. Everyone needs Amazon these days. It's just so much going on versus that. And so what we need to do is have that catch up over time, where the usage starts to fill out. So then let's say instead of say 10 to 20% of it is actual usage and the rest is speculation, we get up to 40, 60, 80, and finally this is something where people aren't just going to dump it because they think it's going down. There's a certain amount they need it for their day-to-day lives, and they're just not going to dump it. And it creates a price floor where people are the utility price floor, where it can't go lower than this because that is what people actually need it for. It's at that point, if it goes below that, then it's a sale because they have a practical use for it today, and then they're willing to buy it as a tool, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what is going on. I've noticed, let's be honest, I'm a fan of Dogecoin, but when people are putting billions and billions of dollars into a coin because coin has dog, and they're putting into coin because coin has dog because Rich Spaceman tweeted something about Dogecoin. Not that he had invested in it, not that he was going to use it for his company, at least not initially. Is there any surprise that this is an immature space? It's okay. It's immature, it's young. Then they went to Shiba Inu coin, which is on that same thing. Just a few weeks ago, a bunch of people got upset because they lost a lot of money in a rug pull for monkeypox Inu coin. $400 million. So it's not when is the crypto is too volatile? Well, that stuff is. People are doing, I would say, objectively unintelligent investment decisions on a lot of this because they're well, if I throw money on it, when you can't come up with monkeypox Inu coin and get $400 million worth of investment in it anymore, we're going to see a much more stable market. When you just when coin has dog and you don't get money because coin has dog, then you have to be, coin does thing. And then you don't have these wild ups and downs. There still will always be market cycles, but it's not going to be you lose 70% of your money overnight, or not overnight, or if you just because the market goes up and down. It'll be a lot more manageable. You won't see, it'll be to where people can more easily live off of this stuff as their primary store of value and medium of exchange.
So I probably should have started with this. How many people in the audience own some form of crypto? So basically everyone. So I figured we're preaching to the choir.
Who has Dogecoin?
Anyone have Dogecoin? To the moon? So I sort of want to know, Joël, sort of your take on how do we get more average people who are non-libertarians, who are not the true believers, and who aren't the people that are just trying to do the get-rich-quick schemes. How do we get more people to actually use it as a form of transaction and a form of money instead of using Federal Reserve notes?
Yeah, so the thing is, obviously there's a bunch of ways on the technology side. I'm going to hit on the regulatory side a little bit. One of the most common things when I tell people, hey, you should start spending crypto, you should start using this as your money, it's not all that stuff. One of the first things people have an objection to, they're like, well, what about capital gains? And it's like, well, no one likes paying taxes for very obvious reasons. Foremost among them is taxation is theft. But at some point, if I buy $15 worth of Bitcoin, and then next week it's worth $25, and then I choose to spend that $25 on, a bagel sandwich and a big latte and a tea for my girlfriend or whatever it is, and if I have to record the capital gains that I made on that transaction, that is onerous, that is ridiculous, and no one's going to do that. And so we're at this point where people who do this, mostly, it's kind of like the small business. Has anyone ever been paid under the table or known a small business that paid anything under the table, did anything off the books, ever? Anyone? But it's extremely common despite technically being illegal because it's too onerous. But it's just this weird situation which I don't like, which is regulatory uncertainty, where people do it and it's small enough that no one cares, even though technically on paper they do care. But then there's the other people that don't want to do it because it's scary, because maybe they do care. And so one thing that could really help, and unfortunately this is not, I don't know how much of this is something that a state level thing could do outside of, seceding from the US, of course, is getting rid of implementing a de minimis exemption. I think that would be huge, where basically, let's say, up to, I've heard people mention, I'd like to have a lot higher, but like up to like $800 for a purchase, you don't have to count that on your capital gains. So let's say you buy 50 grand worth of Bitcoin, it goes up to 150 grand, but then you like spend like $400 on like a new TV or something. You don't have to report, oh, you don't have to like calculate on those smaller purchases. Only if you do like a big thing, like you buy a yacht, or if you sell for fiat currency, then you'd have to report, which I don't like that either, I'm just saying. But at that point, at least it gives people the freedom to just not be scared to just transact. Just you can buy a coffee, you can figure it out. That's one big thing. The second thing, and I believe I believe it's like Keith tweeting about this. I believe the House passed a bill basically exempting developers for lack of a better term, like DeFi products, from being considered as like issuing illegal securities. Because like, let's just say you're a kid and you're having fun with NFTs and you make your own NFT project, maybe this coin also has dog, right? Maybe you make a limited, the Faces of Doge NFT series just because you want to, and then some of your friends want to buy them off of you, and then at a later date, you make super cool, awesome dog coin as a token, and then you airdrop the token to all the people who bought your NFTs. That's cool, but then is that an illegal security where it's like an investment contract where someone bought a share of your digital company, and then by sending this weird dog coin, that's like a dividend or something, and now you're going to prison as like a 14-year-old for just playing around with NFTs of dogs? Like, that is absolutely ridiculous, and it's criminal to criminalize that. So that's part of what we're talking about with like regulatory sandboxes, of course, is more on a greater scale, just letting people figure things out, letting them make money on it to a certain limit, right? To where, no one's going to do this stuff unless there's some sort of we're in the business of making digital tokens, right? Which people exchange and then they have value, of course. But it's not like you're using it to make trillions of dollars and then just saying, haha, no taxes. As awesome as that would be, starting small, right? But the thing about exempting that's one of the most insidious things that's come out has been the attack on developers of open source code. Open source code, it's like a Wikipedia author. Someone says, oh, this happened in here, and I cite this source, and then it's just like coming after that guy for something. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so someone who just codes up something and says, oh, if you run this code, these tokens get kicked out, and if you take this and put in here, you can receive yield, of course, in these tokens on this and that, and that becoming like an illegal security, and then you go after the developer who just wrote some code up that someone else executed, anyone could execute, is a horrendous precedence. So that's one thing I think has been a really bright spot in legal and recent legislative achievements in New Hampshire on that thing. But basically, that's a very long way around the answer to the question of like, how can we get people to use this more? On the regulatory and legislative side, that's how.
Yeah, and to sort of go on that, like one of the biggest parts of any of these sandboxes that we're talking about is the states recognizing digital currencies as currencies and digital assets as assets. You know, right now, from whether it's the SEC, the IRS, there is just total ambiguity where they, are saying it's a security, it's not a security, and they kick in, like Joël was saying with the capital gains taxes, that it should be treated on an equal playing field as fiat. If people are using this as a means of exchange, then it should be treated on an equal field. So, we're pushing back on the IRS, we're pushing back on the SEC to recognize this. This is an obvious thing that people are using as a currency, not as just a get-rich-quick scheme. And recognizing it as that, it should have the same limit. So the federal IRS tax code says you don't have to really report much over $10,000. Now they've been trying to change that for interesting reasons. They've been their little proposal to start tracking payments of $600 or more to obviously crack down on people that are working under the table or aren't reporting certain things on their taxes. That was an obvious scheme. They claimed it was for billionaires, but it was an obvious scheme to try and pick up, waitresses who don't report tips, or, somebody has a side hustle and doesn't report it to the IRS. And, that's all for them to just keep their little empire going of just constantly increasing taxes and constantly putting their foot down on the little guy who's just trying to make an extra buck. So we think it should be the standard that it is now. That $10,000 you shouldn't have to report it. If you're selling that, if it's treated like a currency and not a security, then you're not going to be having to pay massive capital gains over a certain amount. And we think that's appropriate, and the federal government should do that. But we can again preempt them and put that in state law, because they don't have any rules that they apply equally at the federal level. So if we preempt them, we can basically nullify a lot of the federal tax code, a lot of the federal rulemaking authority on this, because they would probably, if there was a lawsuit and it goes to the Supreme Court, they would probably lose, because they don't treat everything equally. And that's something that the Supreme Court, that courts around the country have consistently said. You have to have an equal footing, equal standing for each person who is engaging in this activity. So if you're not having equal treatment under the law, then you're probably not going to win the case. So it would be interesting to see something like that go forward. But the way we do that is these sort of preemption or nullification bills, if you will, to get ahead of the federal government and the banking system that creates a regulatory structure in place and treats everything equally, and that we're in better standing at that point than the federal government in the way that they're treating it. So, and not to mention the economic development we would have from that. I mean, just all you have to do is look at Miami. So the city of Miami has made, being crypto friendly one of their main missions to attract, the financial industry, mostly in New York, to get them to move down to Miami. And it's been working very successfully. They famously have the Miami coin, the stable coin. So there's ways you can attract more folks maybe that are outside of the libertarian community that will come to New Hampshire because of our friendliness to crypto policy and operating with crypto. And we think that's something that is a huge opportunity for us, that we could get some of these companies that deal with this all the time, that don't want to deal with New York, New Jersey, or these hellholes anymore. They want to come to a place where they're free to experiment and innovate. So doing that and sending that signal will be super important, and to really the future of dividing where states stand on financial freedom. So I do want to leave a little time. I don't know where Scott is, but a little time for questions. I think, unless you had any other thoughts, Joël? Okay. Yeah, we can do Q&A if you guys have some questions. But again, please, keep an eye out. This is an issue we'll be engaging on at the state level here in New Hampshire. If you live in New Hampshire, if you don't live in New Hampshire, why aren't you? So you should probably move and get here and help with these things. So next year we'll be looking for folks to help out. So just sign up at our website, americansforprosperity.org, and we'll keep you in the loop.
Just a couple of thoughts. 2015, Bitcoin became an interest of mine, and if you'd have told me when it was $200 a coin that it'd be $21,000 today, I would have been ecstatic. And we're looking at it as a bummer. This is the wrong way to look at it. Second thing is, I think both of you gentlemen agree that Bitcoin is a good product. When it goes from 60,000 to 20,000, I call it a sale. The third thing is, it's not easy enough to use for regular exchanges yet. It's getting easier, but it's not there, so I just store the wealth. The last thing is, the government intrusiveness and interest seems to correlate with the price of Bitcoin. When it drops to 20,000, they don't care anymore. So as long as it stays low, just buy more and just wait your time. That's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, well, I'll start off answering this. Like, neither of us are financial investors. You shouldn't take this as financial advice whatsoever. But the way I sort of look at it, I get a kick out of the folks. I have one in my office that constantly says, "Oh, Bitcoin major crash" or whatever, and it's like, "Oh yeah, shucks, I'm only up 100x now." And it's like, what a terrible thing. But when it comes, this is how I personally view it. Is I view Bitcoin, just because of the transaction rates, the transaction times. I sort of view it more as a solid reserve currency, similar to gold or silver or precious metals. Because it is difficult to transact with. From what I've found, things like Dash or others are easier to use. But again, this isn't an endorsement of any of these things. It's just sort of my personal thoughts. I don't know if, Joël, you have anything.
Well, yeah, that's precisely what I was talking about the speculative phase still, where people believe in the technology, so they put money into it, hoping it goes up, hoping it'll be used on a mass scale at some point in the future, and it probably will. And if it dumps, that's what happens. The speculative asset goes up and down, and at some point when a lot of people are using it, then all of a sudden it's just not going to be quite like that anymore. But yeah, and then that's what I'm saying, is if you believe in it, it's an opportunity to get in early. Again, absolutely no financial advice. I'm not here to, do any of that stuff. But that's what it is right now. This is the investment kind of early speculation phase of things. Or for people like me, it's the experimental phase where I'm just going and seeing, what can I buy? What can I spend it on? What can I do with the blockchain? What happens when I get a transaction stuck and this doesn't work? What about this address format? Like all the tech stuff, I'm like the early troubleshooters. A friend of mine, Ken Bozak, once said, "We're the beta testers of money," which I think is kind of an interesting way of thinking about it, but it's true.
How's it going? I was wondering if there's a push to explicitly allow government employees and government organizations in allowing them to accept crypto, because I know for federal employees it's not. But my thought is that if we have a system where like CDBCs are used by federal employees and they can only use it for certain products while everybody else uses this real money with value, then you have more of an incentive for violence to like go after it. But if they're brought in early, then maybe that's a more peaceful transition. And is there like a push for that in this state or other states?
Yeah, let me hit on that just a little bit. So in the city of Portsmouth right now, you can pay your city taxes in crypto. They did it not too long ago. And oddly enough, it was not like our people. It's not like, it was just like the left-leaning city people wanting to be a modern city that just did it, which is great encouragement. There's been a million headlines over the place. So like a Miami mayor takes his salary, the New York City mayor takes his salary in crypto. Oh, somewhere in Ohio you can pay your taxes in crypto. Like, it's happening already, and I think that, yeah, that's a great way to just, that's the thing is, I think also at this point, enough people of positions of prominence and influence in government are invested in crypto already, to where they're just not going to destroy their own bags. Like, there's still a lot of people. Don't get me wrong, the government as a whole is way more invested in the failing Federal Reserve System than they are in crypto. But there's enough people with enough influence who have enough in crypto to where I think it's going to end up working out okay in the end. But yes, that's exactly it. I do think that any way we can push for government entities, employees, et cetera, to receive it. And one of the biggest, I'm not trying to, so one of the biggest concerns from the government in all this is, for lack of a better word, there's too much of the pie that they're not getting their hands on, that there's too much money being made that they don't get any of. And I think it might make them feel a little better if you try to propose ways in which to give them money through this technology. Once they're receiving this as payments and stuff, it makes them have a better, more positive outlook on the technology as a whole, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to sort of just go off that, I think it's really important to have that be recognized, that you can pay taxes, you can pay fees. None of us in this room like taxes. Taxation is theft, but it is important that government recognizes that as a mode of exchange, because then it's very hard to make the case that it isn't a currency. So when the government accepts that as a mode of payment, then we're in a much better position. So that's part of all of these bills that have been done across the country, is that you can pay taxes, you can pay fees, you can deal with the government in crypto. It's not mandatory, which is important. I don't think going the way of maybe El Salvador or other places where it's mandatory is the best route to take. But having it be an option is important because it's recognized as a currency. So I think as long as it's not mandatory, it's a good thing.
Yeah, can you speak to the importance of not your keys, not your coins? I feel that concept is very important, because if you look at who's going to report a taxable event, it's going to be one of the centralized exchanges. Also, people don't realize is that when you buy cryptocurrency on a centralized exchange, it's not like they have Bitcoin for each one of their Bitcoin holders. It's a promise to a Bitcoin, and it allows for fractional reserve schemes that fuel speculative bubbles. Thank you.
Yeah, so that is a great point, because, it is kind of funny because I almost didn't really touch on it, because it's sort of like a deep assumption of mine that everyone who has crypto has their own crypto, but unfortunately that's not really the case that much anymore. This is something that is one of those things to look out for, is the unhosted wallets or self-hosted wallets talk, which is absolute crap. So when you control your own money, you control your own money. It's like cash in your pocket. It's yours. When, say you go to something like Coinbase and you buy like a bunch of Bitcoin there, and it's on Coinbase, it's in a bank. It's a crypto bank, but it's a bank, basically. You don't hold that money, and if you withdraw it, probably it's gonna work, but you still have to trust someone else to like not go insolvent and not, make sure the only money you can trust is what's kind of in your pocket. Now, financial self-sovereignty is really what the government's concerned about. And there's been a few different regulatory pushes to ban or otherwise restrict usage of what they call self-host or unhosted wallets, which means you holding onto your own money. That's basically like banning cash, where the only way you can have money is in the direct control and possession of an outside entity. And if you think about it, money is just a communication tool for what we as a species value. And so if all of our value is controlled by someone else, like that is a crazy Orwellian thought right there, to where everything we own, someone else can take away. Everything we value and care about in life, someone else has direct control over. And they're trying to make it so that it's difficult or discouraged or whatever to actually control your own money. And that's something we absolutely have to push back against as much as possible. You know, not your keys, not your crypto, absolutely. Not your keys, not crypto, I would even say. And all the worst experiences that anyone has had with crypto tend to be on these crypto banks, on centralized, custodial platforms, and that's kind of unfortunately the easier onboarding experience for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't have crypto, so they have to buy it somehow with a bank account, therefore, and then they also don't really understand how to hold on. Like, if cash falls out of your pocket, you don't get that back. It's gone. Like, you have to like recover it manually. But it's a scary thought of like, oh yeah, I got money in my wallet, then I dropped my phone in the toilet, and then it's gone if I didn't write down my magic words to back it up. It's like what do you mean it's gone? Can't we just call the app and get it back? Nope, it's gone because it was yours and you lost it. And that's a scary thought for a lot of people. People do that with other things, like physical possessions. Like, if you have like a gold ingot in your like cupboard or whatever, and then like, you accidentally let it drop in the trash can, it gets taken out with the trash and it's gone. Like, everyone understands that was on you to secure your belongings. You didn't. But we need to get, as fast as we can, that paradigm shift of this is your physical property, even though it's digital. This is your property. You have to control it, because if you lose it, that's on you. And like radical self-ownership is, a libertarian principle. Obviously, radical financial self-ownership too, because otherwise, more and more people will be on these centralized platforms where they hold your money, and the government will have easier and easier ways of saying that's the only way you can do it. And then we're just back to square zero of, well, I would say square one, because at that point we're at the CBDC-controlled Orwellian nightmare, except they just can't inflate the currency because it's a decentralized minted currency, but they still control everything else about it. So maybe your value doesn't tank as fast, but you still have no freedom. So.
Hello. Yeah, I'm sure I'm missing something. I'll preface that. I'm sure I'm missing something in this, but
That's fine. So am I.
I thought they were attempting to regulate it like crypto as a commodity and not as a security, so it wouldn't be under the jurisdiction of the SEC. And if that's the case, does it make it better or worse or easier or harder for you to regulate it statewide? Or?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a hair split on that, and part of that is because the term crypto means so many things these days. But I guess one of the early oddly enough, in my opinion, wins for crypto was having it being classified as a commodity, because if it was classified as a currency, the government doesn't let competing currencies exist, And so one of the things that's allowed crypto to flourish is the fact that it was considered something that was allowed, right? The problem is that as a commodity has had that weird capital gains tax thing where you can't spend it without reporting that on your capital gains and stuff. And thankfully there are like software solutions that automate a lot of this stuff. So it's possible, but it's still a giant headache for your poor accountant and stuff. But as far as the securities thing, so if you have let's just take like the archetype, Bitcoin. If you have a decentralized coin, no one really knows who made it. Any miners, people all around the world, anyone running a certain program on a certain machine runs the network, and it's just like a token that you can exchange with anyone. That would fall, I guess, under the more commodity thing, although, it's honestly a currency. We're talking about the securities is where, first of all, you know who issued it, and someone issued it with and it has some kind of ways of getting a return on that investment in some way. We were talking about DeFi, or decentralized finance, where, so for example, if you can put a coin, you can buy a token, and you can stake it on some platform and get liquidity, you know, provide liquidity or whatever, and start getting returns on that, then someone could say, you as a developer, you issued an illegal security because you issued like a stock or an ownership kind of thing, and then you got with a promise of return, and then so someone buys it with your promise of return. That's when it starts getting into securities kind of territory. If someone just made yet another digital cash, that's not a problem at all. But when people start making things that, you know, honestly, some of the really cool stuff, right? Where you can create like, hey, like me as a, let's just say you have like a lemonade stand and as a business, right? And you mint 10 NFTs of like 10 of 10, 1 of 10, whatever, NFT of a picture of your, like a hand drawing of your lemonade stand, and like people buy it and they use that to bootstrap the business, and then when you start making money, you airdrop them free lemonade tokens to your initial people who bought those NFTs. That's a fantastic way of bootstrapping a business from nothing, right? Just the problem is those could be securities, and you could get in trouble with the SEC for doing that, and that's the kind of thing that in the past when people are building like large companies and stuff like this, I would argue it never made sense to have to register a security, but it made more sense than just how easy it is for someone to do that. Literally, a kid can go do this for their selling cold water around PorcFest on a brutally hot day like today. They can literally bootstrap their NFT, like mint a bunch of NFTs, and they use the proceeds to buy the water, and they sell it at upcharge, and then they give people free waters for like helping bootstrap the idea or whatever. That could make that kid a criminal and put him in jail for like, you know, doing this. And so that's the securities part of things.
Yeah, and I'll just say it's just totally unclear from the federal regulatory side. They do not equally treat everyone that's using crypto. Their rules are completely ambiguous. And one of the biggest things was when crypto started rising in value, all of a sudden they started paying attention, and every government agency's like, ooh, how do I get a cut of this? You know, so early on they weren't going after people unless you're like Ross Ulbricht, that they go after you and try just completely destroy your life. But on the finance side, they were largely ignoring it. But over the past couple of years, they've just been completely unequal. It's completely unclear what the federal position is on this. Is it a commodity? Is it a security? Is it a currency? And the agencies just seem to want to dip their fingers in it because I think largely, to one of Joel's points, is that they're afraid of the financial freedom that you get from it, of just the inability to regulate it in a large scale, and the competition it provides against fiat currencies. I think we have time for one more.
Have you ever heard the case that you can't own Bitcoin? And if so, how do you think that would affect the regulation of Bitcoin?
Can you elaborate a little bit? What do you mean by you can't own it?
So the idea is that Bitcoin is essentially the private key. The private key is just a number, and you can't own a number. There's not really many precedences in the legal system for someone owning a number. And if someone has access to that number, they can move it on the blockchain in compliance with all rules of the network, and thus they didn't steal any coins, and did you even own them in the first place if they never really moved, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's definitely true. We're definitely entering a different era of what property constitutes, right? And so, like, is digital property a thing? I mean, usually it's been tied to like a physical thing. Now we have purely digital and digitally native property. It's so, it's starting to get a little bit different now when you start having some kind of a decentralized digital identity. So for example, if you have like a pseudonym on a blockchain and then you mint NFTs under this name, and then those keys are associated with stuff, and you start to see like a digital presence with an account that owns these kinds of things, and that kind of makes it to where it's more of a digital ownership thing. But then, of course, no one can steal your money on the blockchain. They can just sort of possess your keys, and now they own it, kind of thing, and send it. But at the same time, I don't think that we have a society where, possession means like where someone can steal it and then they're the rightful owner. I don't think that that's going to end up to hold up in the long term, personally. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about, because literally all you do when you own crypto is you have possession of like a long cryptographic hash that just gets you in and allows you to move stuff on the blockchain. And is that considered ownership? I think it's fuzzy now, but at some point in the future, there'll be a little bit more of a way of like kind of codifying that. One thing that's kind of interesting as like an anecdote on all this is, it was like a couple weeks ago or something, some guy, I forget how some hacker like ripped off some project, and the law firm representing the project sent him like a restraining order via NFT to the address where it went. So the guy took all the money, the guy took all the tokens or whatever, and then, so they don't know who stole it or where this person is in the physical world at all. They just know that that's where it went to. So then they use that to send like a digital like restraining order over to the exact same spot where it worked. I mean, that's like unprecedented legal territory. I'd love to see some lawyers sink their teeth into this one, but yeah, that's just, I think we're in an interesting world that hopefully we have a better answer for your question soon,
I mean, I'll just make a comparison, because the way we sort of designate ownership right now is usually by pieces of paper. So when you buy a house, you get a deed to your house. How secure is that piece of paper? I think probably, putting your deed to your house on the blockchain is much more secure than having that piece of paper. I think that's sort of one of the big innovations that is going to come out of this is you're going to have more secure ownership through that. Is it perfect? No, but neither is the current system. And when it comes to the currency side, currency is based off, one, do people view it as valuable? And usually that's through scarcity and time. So the time amount it takes to produce a certain amount of good, and the scarcity of that item that people have a level of value that they attribute to it. So I would say that current digital currencies have much more strength behind them when it comes to the scarcity and time spent than the current fiat system, where you have no idea what that little dollar bill in your wallet is actually worth at any given time, and they usually just shift it around, shift some numbers around in a computer and tell you what it's worth. When it comes to digital currencies, it's much more solid that this is X amount of time it takes to mine it. This is the amount of crypto that's available currently. I think it's just a much more strong system of valuation than the current system. So is it perfect? No, but I think over time it's going to emerge as the much more valuable and secure way to do things.
If I were to guess your keys or randomly generate it and then spend those funds, would you consider that theft?
I personally, probably. I mean, you can also access my bank account by guessing my password and just taking the random numbers out of there. I don't think any system is completely secure. That's just sort of my take, but I do think it's much more hard. It's much more difficult to guess an encrypted code than to. I am one of the people that once upon a time had a wallet on an app and forgot the code, and it's gone. So I think it's much more secure than certainly like password protected bank accounts that we have now.
Just conclude on that a little bit. So, for example, if you have a 24-word seed phrase to back up your wallet, a lot of times what happens is some people lose part of that in their backup, and so then have to guess one. And so you can, if you have 23 of your 24 words, you can find a way to recover that. It takes like a certain amount of time to literally run through every single possibility of that last word. But it's not that difficult. But then when you get to like, you have to only 22 of the 24 words. Now it's any combination of those next two. And then when you have three, all of a sudden it becomes like, it takes like 10 years to go through that. It just becomes insane because of how complex. So the actual odds of guessing it become very low. But also, I think a lot of this is, we have a very primitive private key system today where, for the most part, where you just have like one private key and you back it up with your seed phrases and that's it. If you lose that, you lose everything. I think in the future, for example, you can have like a lot of projects are working on social backup systems to where you give a piece of it to other people. So if you lose your access completely, then 3 friends of yours can help you get it back, kind of thing. And so then that starts to be a little bit more like, oh, it's actually mine. It's not just mine until I lose it in the sock drawer, you know? And also as far as like thefts of digital property, so I'm just gonna give the NFT example. If you have an NFT and you transfer it to someone else, you could have done that. You could also have gotten like tricked or hacked or whatever, and then it gets stolen. That's why there's secondary marketplaces that allow you to, have like a sale smart contract. They usually take a small commission off of that, but then it's all public. Like me, I sold this NFT on Atomic Hub to this person, and here's the kind of thing. It's kind of like having like a more public market on that. And so then the odds of that being a theft of any kind are like not. And then at some point, you might want to pay more money for an NFT that you're sure is not stolen because you buy it on like a established secondary market where you have the whole sale history from creation, as opposed to just some guy says, here, I'm selling to you, I'm going to transfer it to you if you pay me the money. And you're like, wait a second, is this really yours? Did you buy it legitimately? Because from the transaction history, I see it came from this guy, he's to this guy, and then you're the third owner, but I don't see an actual sale contract on, for example, Atomic Hub or some OpenSea or one of those sites like that. So I think that can kind of help.
All right, Joe, last question.
Yeah, I'm one of those people think that this is like a money for people to play game to exchange stuff. It's not real to me. So I have no clue anything about this, but I know a person who does the mining of this cryptocurrency, and he showed me all these videos of his room with, and they use a lot of power. So, can you say one is for people like want to go to buy something like that, what's the process? And second, what does the mining, those crypto does, and why is that the cost of the electricity goes up, but why is that the crypto goes down the value? Thanks.
Yeah, so this is a surprisingly complex topic, but we'll go. So first off, a minority of cryptocurrencies use mining today. It was what Bitcoin uses. So a majority of probably the market cap of cryptos uses mining, but a minority of projects, most newer projects, use like a proof of stake or a delegated proof of stake or something else where you don't have to do that. But basically, I guess what mining is just you solve a mathematical puzzle really fast on your computer, and solving it has a higher possibility that you get it right, and you get some of the new money that's created. And also you get paid with fees from whoever does that. And so it's just kind of a way to make sure someone doesn't just fake owning the network, so spin up like a million fake nodes and just say like, I own the whole network. It's a way of like, you can't fake computing power that way. And so that's kind of the way it works. The reason you have complex machinery is because at some point, it just because the free market innovates and people say, look, I could have this computer, or I could build a computer that only does the things that mining is used for, and it's a specialized machine, and because I get this much in money back, I kind of get it. And so mining is like the cost of production, right? And in any free market, the profit you get from the goods created is not necessary, it does not always line up with the production costs. Like for example, if for example, the costs go in half, the price doesn't always go in half, right? Sometimes the demand keeps it up, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically, if people are speculating on the price of Bitcoin, it goes up and down and up and down. Just because it goes down doesn't mean it becomes less expensive to produce, at least not in the short term. Sometimes it does, because people will say, okay, I'm spending $1,000 a month on electricity, but I'm making $1,500 a month in Bitcoin, in mining. But then if all of a sudden Bitcoin goes in half, now you're spending $1,000 and you're only making $750 worth. Now you're actually losing money. Sometimes what people will do is they'll turn off their mining machine. They're like, it's not worth doing. But sometimes they're like, well, most of my costs of buying the equipment are already sunk costs, so I'd rather just keep mining to recoup some of those costs, or I keep mining, I just don't sell my coins until they go back up. So that's why the mining hash rate is more consistent than the price. The price goes up and down, but the hash rate just seems to kind of like steadily kind of go up. It does dip sometimes, but yeah. Anyway, I hope that answers it. Any concluding thoughts, Ross?
Yeah, and just on that, I the energy point you made is one that certainly the folks on the other side always make. But there are tons of, one of the most innovative solutions that they've been doing is bumping off excess that comes out of like oil wells or natural gas. It's really cool. You can find it on YouTube. There's a bunch of companies that do it. So you're actually taking excess production from a natural gas well and using that to create to have mining of Bitcoin or any crypto. They set up they have like these trailers, they set them up right at the well spot. So a lot of the concerns around environmental impact is ridiculous, and really is just a fear-mongering tactic that's used to try and get people to not use it, or in the future the government to try and ban its use. But I think it's probably beyond their control at this point for them to ever actually ban it. So we went over time, so we got to wrap up here. But I think if this is again an issue that you care about, everyone in this room is probably more educated than me on actually using crypto and buying it and using it in your daily lives. The best thing you can do is be an ambassador for it. Go out and talk to average people about the benefits of it and why we should be looking at using it instead of things like fiat currency. And then if you do live in New Hampshire, please get involved and at the State House level so that we can create these regulatory frameworks to make it easier to invest in, easier to innovate with, and make New Hampshire once again the best destination in the country and hopefully the world for using and innovating with crypto. So with that, please visit our website, americansforprosperity.org. Joël on Twitter is @DesertLinks, @TheDesertLinks, and visit his page on YouTube, Digital Cash Network. So really appreciate him joining me, making me not look stupid. So appreciate everyone. Thanks very much.